I'm going to use the Leaves of Holly stamp set and show you probably three different ways to get different effects using embossing, because we all know how to use embossing to make nice pretty gold sentiments and things, but this is going to use something different. So first one, we're going to use craft card, and I've cut it to the same size as a normal greeting card front, so it's 14.8 by 10.5. Craft card comes 6 by 6, so you can't make the whole base out of this because obviously it's not big enough. So I tend to cut it that size and then stick it onto a card front. So most important things with embossing: make sure you have an embossing buddy, because the embossing buddy stops all the static and stops any grease from your fingers or any oil or stickiness that's around, making the embossed powder stick where you don't want it. So embossing buddy, and we're going to emboss the whole of the front of the card. So we've got rid of any oil and grease so that the embossing powder is always only going to stick where we want it to. So for embossing, we use the Versamark stamp pad. Mine is disgustingly dirty, so ignore that fact. You might have a nice, clean, pristine white one, but this has had so much use as it's definitely got stained. And we're just going to stamp the stamp all over with the Versamark. Now, this is a new stamp, and a little hint for whenever you get new stamps, particularly the clear stamps, doesn't seem to matter quite so much for the red clingy ones, but the clear stamps, it's always a good idea to actually use Versamark on them before you start to stamp with ink, because it helps the ink stick to the stamp better. I don't know whether it's to finish after the manufacturing process or whatever, but Versamarking your clear stamps anyway, even if you're not going to do embossing, actually helps them. So that's just a little hint, the new cleary stamp paddy things. So I'm going to Versamark my leaf, and then I'm just going to stamp it randomly all over the card. So we'll go, I have one in this corner here, and we'll have you don't tend to see it on the coloured cards. You tend, and on white even, you'll see where you've stamped. You have to remember when you're doing it on craft card. So that's fine. So I'll put that there. You can see that one a little bit. That's good. I'll have another couple over here somewhere. So we'll have one somewhere in vaguely the middle. So I can vaguely see where those are, so I'm not going to overstamp them. Not that it matters too much for this sort of thing. And then we'll have another one up in this corner here. So that's stamped those. I'm going to also use the little berries just randomly, and I've got to try and guess roughly where my leaves aren't, so, which is fine. Here, I think. I'll put some over this side if I've got room. Sure, I might be overlapping there a little bit because I can't see where I stamped, but that's fine. So once we've stamped it with the Versamark, we get our embossing powder. So I'm using the white embossing powder, and I always put my embossing powders in old, cleaned, obviously, Chinese takeaway tubs or something similar, because I like to have space. Being a messy crafter, I try and reduce mess as much as I possibly can. But having it in this means it's a lot easier, especially when you're embossing big images, to make sure you can get the powder all over where you need it to go. So let's make sure those are covered there. And then the other side. And then just give the card a bit of a flick, and you can see there that just a little bit more on that bit there. I can see not quite done. So we can see there that, can you see how it's just covered the images, and I haven't got any bits of, bring it close and then you can see it. So I haven't got any little bits of powder where I don't want them to be. So I'm really happy with that, because if you find you do get the, now you see, even using the box, I do get the powder everywhere. Never mind. That's because I'm a messy crafter. Right, so if you do find you've got little bits of powder where you don't want them to be, just use a little paintbrush and just sort of waft it off. But usually, if you've used your embossing buddy and then put your Versamarked images on, just flicking the back of it will get rid of any excess powder. So then I'm going to make a noise now, because I'm going to use my heat tools. So talk amongst yourselves while I just do I'm going to use coloured ink, and I think I'll go with, what should we go with for that? Mossy Meadow, is that too dark? No, let's try, holly leaves are dark, aren't they? Let's go with Mossy Meadow. So I want to show you how I do the colouring in of here. Now, obviously you can use stamping blends, you can use the watercolour pencils, you can use whatever, but I want to show you how to colour your embossed images just using the stamp pad and a paintbrush. So she wondering where on earth she's put the paintbrush. I did have before. Oh, here we go. Right, there we go. Just got a little tub of water here and my paintbrush. So the way to do it, obviously never ever put water anywhere near your ink pads because it doesn't do them any good. And I find with these new ink pads, with the old ones, you could squeeze them and get ink on the top of the ink pad.
Yeah.
But with these new ones, I find it really difficult to do that. So here's my tip. Use a stamping block. So you're just going to put the stamping block on the ink pad so you pick up the ink on the stamping block. Okay, so then we can use it like any sort of palette. So we get some water on the paintbrush and pick up the colour. And that allows you to make the colour quite dense if you keep the paintbrush fairly dry, or you can make it much lighter, obviously, if you put more water through it. So I'll put a bit more water through this one, I think. And then it's just about painting your image. And you can see that it doesn't stick to where the embossing powder is. So you can be a bit messy with it, because I'm not into doing really detailed colouring or anything. It doesn't suit my personality at all. I like to get it down like this. So I'm just going to use that. So you can just sort of scribble it all over the image, and just it'll fill in bits that aren't embossed. That just colours it in really nicely. So then all we need is some kitchen towel, a couple of bits, because I'm going to need it for other things. I can clean off the stamp pad. Same thing. Just going to pick, this is my old ink pad, so actually I could use the top. If you are going to use the top of the ink pad, so if I'd squeezed it and got ink up there, I'll show you how to do that, because I can do it with these older ones. Because you can use that as like that, so you can pick up ink there. Right. The problem with that is if you use a lot of water then in there, you must dry the lid before you close it. Just be careful about that. So I personally prefer to, got it all over my fingers now, as always, I prefer to use a block because I think it's easier. So this time I'm just going to use the water painter. So and the beauty of the water paint, of course, you can just dab it on a piece of kitchen roll. It'll clean the brush, which is good. So that then makes a nice card front, and all I need then is to add a greeting. So one of the tricks I like doing with punches actually is if I punch out the same shape and then cut it in half, and depending on the shape, depends which way you cut it, it gives me an automatic edge for my greetings without me having to spend too much time or fussy cutting something else. So I'm just going to stick one of those either side on here. Oop. Without getting glue all over me. One end and one the other. Using Tombow, because then I can move them around if I need. Just hold that for a second to make sure it's stuck. So we'll stick this on first. Then all I need to do is put some sort of greeting inside and decorate the envelope, because of course envelopes cannot be nude. Do not like nude envelopes.
No.
Because I cut it exactly to the card front, just be a little bit careful sticking it onto your card front. And I would just, with craft card, I tend to hold it down for a bit after you've glued it, because it doesn't glue just quite as quickly as the ordinary cards, ordinary basic white or coloured cards. So stick that on, there we go. And then if I can find where on earth I've put my dimensionals, there we go. We'll stick that on with a couple of dimensionals, I think. There we go.
Yep.
Might add some jewels or something on that. Who knows? Need something up there. Might put a few gems or something up there just to add to it. But basically, there's your card. Really simple, really quick. All I did with this, instead of colouring it in with green, I did exactly the same thing with the white ink pad, picked up the white ink and used a paintbrush just to put it in. And you can just use, you see I've made it slightly paler on the flowers and slightly darker on the leaves. That's just about how dry the brush is and how much you pick it up, but it's a nice technique. And the beauty of having that white embossed edge means it's really difficult to colour outside the lines. So another great advantage of embossing. So the next technique is I'm going to use that colour band technique. So here's a finished card, not a Christmas one. Here's a finished one I've done before. So this time I'm actually using basic white as my card. And I've cut it to the same size as your card base, so 14.8 by 10.5, but I am going to trim it down just a little bit. And I like to have my piece, when I'm doing blending type things, I do like to do it with an edge that I can then trim, because it's actually quite difficult to get blending absolutely even over the edge of a card. I find other people, of course, could be far better than me and manage it perfectly well, but not me. So again, we want to emboss buddy. What do we do? What we use an emboss buddy? Do we buddy emboss? I don't know. Is there a verb to do with buddying? I don't know. I'm just
don't know.
I'm going to use my emboss buddy all over the card, or I'm going to buddy emboss all over the card. I don't know. Anyway, there. What am I like? Anyway, so same thing again. We're just going to use the Versamark, and we're going to put the image in various places over the card. So you can see now, hopefully, just about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can see that now. So again, it doesn't look much because there's not much happening on there. Clean bit of scrap paper. Most of mine are covered in ink and all sorts. So I've got, do need my scrap paper now, because we're going to get even messier now and use some ink. So I'm going to use Christmassy inks, I think. That'd be quite dark. We'll have a look. So just choose 3 inks. I've chosen Night of Navy, Blackberry Bliss and Cherry Cobbler. So they're all quite dark colours, but we'll see how we go. Good strong colours are much better for this technique than the really pale colours. So I'm going to start with Cherry Cobbler, I think. So this time I'm using my blending brushes. So just going to pick up the colour on the brush. All these pads I think are relatively well inked, even these old ones. I think they're okay. Yeah, it's not too bad. So remember, with blending, we had the class in this, but you start off the page and come onto it. So I'm going to do stripes of colour across, and I'll probably have this one in the middle, my lighter colour in the middle. So I'm going to dab it off first and then start to come onto the page and just put it roughly where I want it. And again, we can make this all, you know, as dark as you want, as light as you want. It's up to you. There, now those colours will actually set beautifully if we leave them to dry a little bit. And I'm going to leave it to dry before I then do the magic bit, which is to clean it all up. For which you just use a bit of dry paper towel. Come on, dry. Show you on a bit that's already done. So there, it's a little bit splodgy because it's not fully dried, and plus I haven't spent enough time getting Cherry Cobbler's a little bit dry and I probably need to re-ink it. but I might go back and put a bit more cherry cobbler out down the middle. But let's just use these as greasings again, and I think we'll go in with Night of Navy, I think. So for this top, I just want to show you about colouring with white ink. We've shown coloured with coloured ink, exactly the same with white. Gus, don't need your help. So I'm just going to pick up the white from the ink pad onto the stamping block, and then use a water painter this time. So not too wet, not overly wet. I can always add water if I need. Just to pick up that, and all I'm going to do is actually colour in the berries. I think I might colour in the lot. I can't decide. I'm going to colour in the berries quite heavily because they are white, aren't they, on mistletoe? Then I'm going to add more water to just break this down a little bit and make it a little bit less strong, and I think we'll just colour in very lightly. So just a little hint when you are colouring in these leaves, if you get too much white, or that you think they're going to be too white, too filled in, and you want to take it off a little bit, just use a bit of paper towel and dab before it dries, and you can take off some of that colour. So there we have it. Then if I want to make the berries darker, I can just take some extra water off the brush, and I've taken it off the top, so it's going to be fairly dry, and then I can pick up a much more concentrated amount of colour and add more to the berries if I want. So there we have the finished coloured card, and I'm going to stick it onto the front of a card in a minute, and I've just cut out this, which I'm actually going to stick to a piece of white, so I'll do that. I'm just going to stick this to that piece of white there, and then I can cut round it again just to give me a little bit of an edge. And stick that onto my base card. Right, it's just about baking up the cards. I'm going to stick that onto my base card. Just using some Tombow. Do you find that craft card tends to bend when you use it a little bit, especially if you're embossing on it, but it'll stick down if you put plenty of Tombow on it. Now, a little tip with craft card is hold it down while you're sticking it, because it can buckle, so make sure it's stuck down really firmly. And then I'm just going to add, I think I'll use the end bit of getting low on my dimensionals. So I'm just going to use the end bits here. It's going to be fine. I always use every little bit of the dimensionals pack, and then I think we'll have that. I don't want it spoiling all my mistletoe, so we'll have that somewhere like there, I think. There we go. And that, again, just a simple card, but tells you how... Where's my other ones? I lost them. So I made up this one. So this was the painted one I did before, and I made that up, just added a little bit of twine to that one. You've seen that one before. And of course, do not forget to stamp your envelopes. So I've got some envelopes stamped with holly for my holly cards, and I've got an envelope stamped with my mistletoe for my mistletoe card. So I hope you enjoyed those little ways of playing with embossing. So I can't decide, and this is perhaps a question you could answer in the comments. Do you think the craft card is better stuck on without an edge or with an edge? I think that time it is, because I've edged the sentiment, so I don't know. Both of them are okay. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing these cards, even if they're not in the middle. There we go. I hope you've enjoyed seeing these cards, and yeah, join me again. Please subscribe to the channel, put any comments below. I'd love to hear from you, what you're doing with your card making, whether you've tried these techniques and whether you've enjoyed them, and let me know. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything, and I hope to see you soon. Don't forget to visit my website and sign up on my email list, and then you'll know what I'm doing when. Bye for now.